Hey everybody, this is Bo Sanders, and I am here with Aaron Harper, our musical director of musical worship.
I play the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun to just record. We've been talking about doing this for a while. We just haven't made it happen, but partly because everything keeps changing all the time on us, and then we put our energy into like making adjustments and figuring out new configurations. But I just thought it would be fun to chat with you a little bit about worship and let people hear your heart, and then just it's totally unscripted. I just thought it would be fun to do this and give people a little like a little window into the conversations that you and I have.
Yeah, that sounds great.
For people who don't know you or haven't met you yet, can you just talk a little bit about the role that musical worship plays in your life? Like, why is it important? Why have you decided to invest so much time and energy in this?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe a good place to start is by saying that for me, worship as it's often understood or experienced in church is just a fraction of what is actually like where my passion lies. For me, in general, spirituality is a really important element of my life. Um, and I think being able to create spaces that help to facilitate um, an encounter with the divine is like, I mean, that's a part of why chaplaincy is kind of where I'm aiming for, is being able to do that. And um, for people who come from very different traditions and you know, even outside of Christianity. So worship itself is more than about like music as a ritual. That's a way that we engage in worship, but it's not the only way.
Hmm.
Um, so music is for us in the church is an important way that we do that. But I think that we engage in worship in lots of different ways um, that we might not necessarily identify as spiritual in nature.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm a big proponent of like spirituality isn't just a facet of our lives. It's a part of who we are fundamentally. And so um, we we take time in church to practice that as something that's set apart. But really, I think we're always sort of engaging in worship in one way or another in the way that we spend our time.
Man, that is such an interesting distinction. So
Mhm.
you, I mean, you clearly marked like we have music, we have worship, which is a much bigger thing that music may be a part of, but then we also
Mhm.
have spirituality. I think, designating it that way is I mean, that's a really interesting distinction to make, to just be really clear and not let them sort of bleed into each other so much that they're interchangeable without
Mhm.
some real like intentional reflection being made about what's happening with each one of those
Mhm.
areas of life.
Yeah, well, I think the way that it could be understood is like, um, spirituality are those things that like we use as a lens for making meaning in our lives. So they're the things that bring us joy, and that can be, um, I like we have this quilting group. I think that in and of itself can be a form of spirituality. It doesn't have to be something separate because it's the things that connect us to one another, connect us to ourselves, connect us to God. Um, so those things, in my mind, those things are a form of worship, equal to a musical engagement in worship.
Wow. Now,
So yeah.
before we talk about like specific stuff, right? Like
Hmm.
logistics. I'm intrigued that you said I think you said spirituality is like a big part of your life.
Hmm.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, um, I think it's kind of a big topic. So trying to be concise in like how I kind of talk about it, but I think like um, I think for me, a part of what's helpful in like kind of understanding where I'm coming from in that is that um, I feel like when I because I've grown up in a Christian household, that's my background, and specifically um, conservative and Pentecostal leaning environment.
Oh,
And so for me, although at the time none of those things meant anything. They weren't there weren't like classical identifications or
right.
anything like that. My family didn't really care about like identifying with a particular like denomination or anything like
Oh,
that.
interesting. So like
Um,
non-denominational.
yeah, we were non-denominational, but yeah, with like a lot more um, there was a lot more emphasis placed on like being spirit filled or something like that is how we
Oh,
would talk about it.
okay.
So for me, my introduction into like faith was not specifically religious. It was more um, like a relationship in the way that I think sometimes it can be. Um, it's funny. I say, I hear people say that sometimes, and I
Yeah.
kind of roll my eyes. But that is, I think it's because I can relate to some of the language that
Okay.
it really was more about um, like how I'm engaging with God, and not so much just doing the rituals because that's what we do,
Yeah.
but really asking those questions of like how are these things um, like how am I engaging with God? What are those things that are meaningful? And that obviously as I've grown has developed a lot,
Yeah.
and my understandings of it and my engagement of it has become more critical, and not in the bad sense, but in just like a more
Yeah.
thoughtful way.
Yeah.
But that's sort of my background, is like how are we doing these things? How are they bringing life to us and to one another? So to me, that's a form of spirituality, not specifically religious. I think it
Okay.
happened in the context of a religious environment, but uh, it doesn't have to be tied to those things specifically.
Man, that is so interesting. So you know
Yeah.
that when people say that they're spiritual but not religious, I'm so happy
Mhm.
for them. I love that, and I'm really
Yeah.
really happy if that works for them. Uh, you know that I am religious but not spiritual.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and I might be the only one, I don't know, but uh, but it's so good for me, when I hear you and some of the other mystics in my life, people who are a little more mystical, talk about their connection to the divine or being a part of this living web with creation. And it always helps me so much to expand my horizon and like imagination for what the life of faith means and can be. So
Mhm.
thanks for answering that question. I know it's like
Yeah.
we probably could talk all day about it, but I really appreciate
Yeah.
you trying to answer that.
Yeah. Well, I just say too um, that a lot of times there's a distinction, like a hard line drawn between religion and spirituality, and I
Yeah.
might have even kind of been referring to that when I was talking about it. But I think it's important to sort of acknowledge like we do need both, um, and
Agree.
like I think that for me, an area that I've had to like consciously build is being connected to a very specific tradition. So spirituality is a broad thing, but um, I think it also has to be grounded in something like tangible. I mean, religion is our community of origin, and it's the place that as much as sometimes I try to get away from some of those associations,
Yeah.
it's my religious family, so
Yeah. So
um so I think that's important too.
let's totally switch gears.
Sure.
And I want to talk about two things with the time we have left. I want to talk
Hmm.
about tech, like technology
Hmm.
and stuff. And then I want to talk about hybrid worship going forward.
Hmm.
So, you and I have had a very interesting time so far with you, your employment here, in that our technology has not worked great. It's old, like the actual wiring,
Yeah.
the sound system's like in another room. So like if you're tuning your guitar or singing into a microphone, I have to be standing in the doorway in another room and then hear what's happening in that room and then walk into the other room and make the adjustment, right?
Right.
And even like when you went to plug in your guitar the first week into the jack, the electronic jack, so that
Hmm.
your guitar would come through the sound system, we found out that our jacks are dead and they have no power in them. And
Yeah.
so your guitar didn't come through the sound system.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say both. Oh, and then for a while we had you singing in a closet so, because we needed you to have your
Yeah.
mask off, but you couldn't be in the same room with your mask on because that's where we were at that point. So I
Right.
just wanted to say to you two things. One is thanks for being so flexible, and and you're learning new songs every week. And so I just wanted to ask about that, like how has that whole thing been? Um, do you is it been as challenging to you as it appears would be to me?
That's a good question. I appreciate you being sensitive to that. I think I knew. Well, I guess I'll say it like this. I knew that I didn't know what to expect coming into
Mm.
the role. I knew just by my own nature and my background in like music and leading in churches before, I knew that it was going to be a different experience. And so and you know COVID has just made it so that nothing is normal anymore. So I think in some ways I came in maybe more flexible than I would have been
Oh,
otherwise, because um, I think if there is a silver lining to this whole season, it's been that we all have had to learn how to adapt a lot.
oh yeah.
And I think that too, like our technology has developed to a level where we can
Yeah.
do some of the things that we're trying to do, even if we're all still trying to figure out how to utilize it that way. So, singing in the closet, I mean, I don't know. It's not really a big deal to me because what's important to me is that we're engaging like as a community in the ways that um we can, I mean,
Yeah.
that I think that's one of the strengths that we have is that we can adapt to change. And
Oh, that's
change is always happening. And I think the challenge for us in every season is learning how to adapt to those changes in a way that continues to facilitate a sense of community and engagement.
oh.
So yeah.
Well, I sure am grateful for your willingness. Just like two dumb like logistics things that like people don't even know
Hmm.
is when we first had you in that room, it has a wall of windows on one side.
Right.
We wanted that to be the background so that when you were leading us in song, that we could see out. We thought that'd be a really cool backdrop. But what happened in reality is that it didn't translate to Zoom, and you ended up being whitewashed out, and you looked like an angel or like like just an energy source.
Yeah.
So then we had to turn you around so that you were facing the window, and then you were front lit, and I mean, just dumb stuff, right? And but
Yeah.
there's a hundred things like that, like when we went to having the Zoom computer on a rolling desk,
Right.
we found out that if we got too close to you, all people could hear was the actual strumming of the metal strings on the guitar.
Yeah.
And that all they could hear is the guitar. But if we were just a little bit too far away, they couldn't hear the guitar.
Yeah.
And they could only hear you. So, I mean, there's just been every week there was something like that. And so I just wanted to say thank you, because I can only imagine what starting a new job in this window has been like. So I really appreciate you being willing to roll with the punches there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It has been pretty wild though.
It has. Yeah.
I mean, literally every week something worked and something didn't work.
Yeah.
Bigger question. What has it been like coming into like a staff position during COVID when we're not, like, even you and I haven't been physically in the same space since Christmas Eve. So 8 weeks, has it been challenging to feel a part of community in a way when you don't have those times of like pre-service wandering around the sanctuary, or afterwards while you're cleaning up? And has that been a challenge? Do you feel connected to the congregation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe a part of how I'll respond is that I do, first of all, to answer your question, I do feel a part of the community.
Good.
And honestly, it's been really a blessing for me. And I think a part of it is, I know that it's kind of like a wacky time and things are different, but there's a period of time before stepping into this where Krista and I were sort of intermittently attending, and we weren't really, I would say we weren't really connected to a community in a meaningful way for a number of years. And so and we have our own reasons for that, and I think maybe we can get into those at some point in the future. But for me, there was I think maybe just some hesitancy for some of those reasons coming back in the community. And but I've just been really blessed and grateful to be a part of this community. I felt really welcomed. And even with all these little hiccups and tech glitches and things like that, to me I still feel a sense of connection to others.
Good.
And yeah, so I mean, it is weird, but I do feel connected to the community in ways that I haven't felt for a while. So that's been really nice for me.
You know what? That's great to hear. I know you've got other things to do today, so why don't we wrap up here? But let's do this. Let's say that we're going to do this again in 2 weeks. Okay. And then why don't you and I talk through some of the logistics of hybrid worship 2.0 and what it's going to look like going forward in March and April.
Okay.
And sort of dream together about like, what does it look like for 2022? Like, what's the rest of the year look like? But if people have any questions for you or for us, they can send them in. They can email us, or they can leave them in the comment section. So why don't we just plan to do this again in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And then, we'll dream together and answer any questions that come in.
Okay, that sounds great.
Well, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity today, and all the time, but also your flexibility. And I just wanted to say how glad I am that you're here and that God brought you. And so I know this season has been really wild to start a new position, but I just thank you for rolling with the punches. I just want to say that again.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a blessing for me too. So
okay.
Thank you.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. And if people want to send in questions, we would love to try and respond to them.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah. Thank you.